everybody, good evening and welcome to your very own BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel. I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and in this particular class we are going to be revising and we will be learning animal tissues in one shot completely. So I hope all of you here are excited for today's class, and very quickly students, please do let me know if my audio, my video and my screen and whatever I'm writing on the screen is visible to all of you. If it is, students, give me a quick thumbs up in the chat to let me know that we are good to go. And as you all know, I know many of my students would be watching this video very much after the live stream. So if you are watching this video much after the live stream, do not worry, you can skip a little bit of the beginning and you can directly go to the part where I will be teaching you. Now, of course, I know many of you here in the live class are very excited, and very quickly, please do share this video with all of your friends. And of course, to the others who might be having some parallel conversations, I request you to not have that, right? Okay, good evening everybody, good evening. Now very quickly, I would like to tell you what we are going to be covering in today's class. So first and foremost, we are going to be learning about animal tissues in great detail. Now as we all know, we know what are tissues and we know there are different kinds of tissues, but today we are going to be looking at animal tissues in great detail. And in this we will be learning about epithelial tissues, we will be learning about connective tissues, and we'll be learning about their types as well, along with which we are going to be learning about muscular tissues, and then we have nervous tissue as well. So I request all of you to please make sure you have your notebooks and pens ready with you, have your textbooks open as well, where we will learn all of this in great detail. And it's not that we're just going to be learning it in any random manner, but rather we will be learning it in a way with important questions as well, which is why this session right here is going to be very important. I will not just be telling you about this is the topic, this is how we learn, but I'll also be telling you what are all the important questions and the topics, and this is for class 9. Now let me remind you that this particular class is going to be helpful for both my CBSE students as well as ICSE students who have this in grade 9. So trust me, both of this, or rather this particular class, is going to help both of you, right? So I hope all of you here are excited for today's class. Yes? No, see, actually the basic idea of tissues you should have, if you know this, animal tissues is easy. Like you can learn plant tissues and animal tissues separately, right? Ma'am, you don't take doubt. Who said that? I of course take doubts, right? But I request all of you to not unnecessarily spam, and when I'm teaching you in class, I request you to pay attention to me, right? So that is something that I request all of you to do. So are you all excited? Very good. So just give me one moment. Okay. I just needed to increase my table height a little bit so that I can, sort of see and understand this a little better, right? So let's get started, everybody. And of course, this PDF is going to be available for all of you. So we'll get started with the first part of it, where we're going to understand what are tissues, right? So of course, when we talk about tissues, so let me just give you a general introduction once again, because just the basic definition of tissues is more than enough. But if you in the live chat know the answer of what are tissues, you can let me know right away. And if you're watching this later as well, pause right now and try to give the answer yourself, right? So as we all know, right, what are tissues? Tissues are nothing but they are a group of cells, right? So we see that they are a group of cells that are similar in structure and that perform a common function, right? So this is what we understand as tissues. Are we all clear? Now what are your key points that you need to keep in mind when you do the definition? The fact that they are a group of cells, right? So we know that they're a group of cells that are similar in structure and that perform a common function, right? So we are talking about tissues. Now we say that in animals we find 4 different types of tissues. Now let's think about it. Now look at us human beings. One very common example is us humans, right? Now when you look at us human beings, what do you see on the outside? Like just on the outside, if you were to look at us humans, what do you see on the outside? Can you tell me? Yes? In the outside, you will tell me, ma'am, I see my skin, right? So we see that our complete body on the outside is covered with skin, Yes? Now, of course, along with that, if I ask you, okay, our body is covered with skin, but you also understand that when I'm looking at my hands or when I'm looking at my legs or when you look at yourself in the mirror, you are able to see yourself standing upright. Your face has a certain definition, your hands has a certain way of looking, your hand has a proper shape, right? Everything looks very definite. Yes? So can you tell me what is it that is able to give your body this kind of structure or framework? Can you tell me? You're able to look at yourself, you see skin, but along with that also you see that so much more is there, right? So what exactly is happening? भानु और बाकी सब क्लास में ऐसे रैंडम बातें करना बंद कीजिए प्लीज. Very good. Different body parts are there. Somebody is telling me, ma'am, muscles are there. Ma'am, bones are there. Somebody has told me, ma'am, bones or skeleton is there. And I am able to do all of this, right? Now, along with this, when you look at yourself, right, you're able, okay, you see your body surrounded with skin. Then you see that, okay, ma'am, I have definite framework. I am able to stand upright and I'm able to do all of these things. But at the same time, you also understand that you are able to breathe. You are also able to get a lot of energy, right? And you're able to do a lot of things. Now you understand that various things that are there, right? Various things that are there within your body, they are made up of tissues. And each kind of tissue carries out a specific function. So in this case, what do we understand? We understand that there are certain tissues which are protective in nature. We understand that there are certain tissues which probably provide a certain framework, right? So I'll write framework here, right? And plus maybe some other functions that they carry out, right? Now, along with this, we also see that there are certain tissue in our body which allows with movement. Now, if I'm standing here talking to you, writing all of this in the screen, right? So this right here is important. Jannat and Banu, if you continue talking in class, you will be blocked from the channel. I hope you are clear. Then last but not the least, right? Just like how we are all able to communicate with each other, you understand that within our body also there's a lot of communication that's happening, right? So we also see that there are certain tissues which are specialized for communication, or I will write here as coordination, right? So this is what we understand as that, okay? Are we all clear with the general understanding of what tissues do in our body? I am not talking about plants. I am talking about what happens within our body, right? Yes, are we all clear? Do we understand that in our body, the kind of functions these tissues are going to specialize in are protection, providing framework and many other things, right? Framework plus other functions because it's a variety of functions that they carry out, movement and coordination. Harish, I request you to have a close look at the chat because I see that there are some spamming happening, but others please don't mind with it. So now let's start with the first function, right? Let's talk about protection, yes? So when we talk about protection, right, we know that just like how in plants, when I talk about protective tissue, we know that epidermis is there. But similarly, just like how in the plants, the epidermis provides protection, we see that in the animals, we also have a protective tissue, which is called as the epithelial tissue. Yes? So let's understand epithelial tissue with a very commonly asked question in your examination, right? So the question here that they may ask you is to describe the structure and function of epithelium, or they may say epithelial tissue, right? Or sometimes they may ask you to describe the types of epithelial tissue. Yes? So they may ask you this particular question as well, right? This is a concept session plus questions, right? Please don't think that because some questions are there, I am not teaching you concept. This is concept plus question session. So I hope all of you are excited. Yes? Do animals have epithelial tissue? They do, because we don't call it as human tissue. We call it as epithelial tissue, right? And we call it as animal tissue because all animals have it, right? So first let's understand tissue by tissue and then I'm going to take your doubts. So when we talk about epithelial tissue, we've already established that it is protective in nature. Now, whenever you learn tissues, there are three things you need to keep in mind, right? So you need to know about its structure, you need to know where we find it, and you need to know about the function. right? So you need to know these three things. Yes? You need to know its structure, how it appears like, you need to know about its location, and you need to know about its function. Okay, so these are three things to keep in mind. Now, when we talk about epithelial cells, we see that they form a continuous sheet of cells, which of course we see that they don't have any intercellular spaces between them, right? So what you see right behind me, right? This right here is an epithelial tissue, okay? And see, these are the cells, right? These are the epithelial cells that are there, yes? Now notice how all these cells, what do you notice about it? I want you to tell me. First and foremost, we see that they are a continuous sheet. It's arranged one after the other, right? And we see that there is no space present between them, right? So we see that it is a continuous sheet which has no intercellular spaces. And its main function, right? We see that one of the main function of epithelial tissue is to provide protection. Now within our body, we see that there is not just one kind of epithelial tissue, but we find different types of epithelial tissue. Now how can I categorize my different types of epithelial tissue? I can do it in various ways. One is I can characterize it based on its appearance, how it looks like, right? Then the second way in which I can characterize is based on its number of layers, okay? So these are two things you have to keep in mind. One based on its appearance, second based on number of layers, yes? So now of course based on appearance, you see that I have squamous, I see that there is columnar, I see there is cuboidal. That means that structurally we see that the cells will have a peculiar shape. Now based on number of layers, I can either have simple or I can have stratified. Are we clear with this much? Yes or no? So much we are clear with, right? It's very simple and easy. Going back to a question, with a small amount of cementing material, I will explain this in some time, right? I'll explain the cementing material in some time. Yes? Very good. So let's get started with the next part of it. Now if you notice, all of these, you were telling about the cementing material that was there, right? So this is where I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on that. Now all these cells, let me just go back. If you notice, all the epithelial tissue that was there, or all the cells that are there, they are found on a particular membrane. Whatever I'm highlighting on white, right? Whatever I'm highlighting in white here is what we understand or what we call as a basement membrane. So basically, if you think about it, going back a little further on what we know that cells that are there, they form tissues, right? Different types of tissues go ahead and form organs. Various organs form organ systems. And last but not the least, we see that different organ systems come together to form an organism, right? So this is something that we all know. Now, based on this, what we observe with epithelial tissue is that the cells of the epithelial cells, right, or the epithelial cells that are there are found in the basement membrane. Now, this membrane, you can think of it as a sheath, right? You think of it as a piece of paper that is there. It's a piece of paper, and on top of this, you have the cells, okay? Now, it is thin. It is very fibrous. So, when I say fibrous, think of how the threads are there in a sari, right? How the threads are there in a sari. There are many thread-like structures, fiber-like structures, right? And we see that it is a supporting structure on which your epithelial cells are found. Now, what is the main function of the basement membrane? Why am I talking about it? Because I told you that the primary function of the epithelium is to provide protection. So, what it does is, if the epithelial cells are here, right, on this, we have my basement membrane, and just before that, right, just underneath that, we find the remaining other tissues, right, whether it is your connective, muscular, whatever it is, your remaining tissues are here. So we see that it acts as a membrane between this to protect them and to protect them from mechanical stress that is there, right? So this is what we understand as basement membrane. Now Harish, if you could make me come to the center, it would be great, right? Otherwise I will move a little bit as much as I can, right? So in this particular case, where all do we find it? Yes, where all do we find our epithelial cells? We will go one by one. Now broadly, if you were to ask me where we find the epithelial tissue, we see that it is found in the inner linings, right? We find it as the outermost covering of certain parts, or we find it as the inner linings, right? Yes. Okay. Ma'am, epithelium and epithelial tissue is the same? Yes, it is the same only. Interchangeably we use it, right? So now let's go on a little bit detail and we'll understand about your squamous epithelium, right? So we will talk about squamous epithelium that is there. Now first and foremost, when we talk about squamous epithelium, right? So let me just go back to maybe this slide. This slide is an example of the same. So squamous epithelium that is there, I will use maybe another slide, yeah. So when you talk about squamous epithelium and the structure of it, yes, we see that squamous epithelium that is there is made of a number of flattened cells like this. So this is the top view, right? So if I look at it from top, we see that it is made up of number of flattened cells, right? So we see that the cells here are thin and they are flattened, and we see that they tend to have a prominent nucleus. Yes? So we see that these are the important things that we need to notice when we talk about the squamous epithelium. So squama actually, right? If you talk about the word squama, squamous means it is to be flattened, right? So it is thin and flattened. Now when we talk about where we find the squamous epithelium, we find it in different parts. We find it in the inner lining of our mouth, we find it in the inner lining of the alveoli, we find it in the inner lining of our esophagus, and we find it in the linings of the blood capillaries. Now understand that it is not always the inner linings. It can be found on the outside of something, or it can be found within the inside of something. Yes? Do you want me to go back and repeat this once again? How many of you have not understood this part? Yes? How many of you have not understood this clearly? I know it is a tough topic, which is why I am going to wait, right? Arey, why you want to do revolt and all? Already things are, you know, you don't want to revolt. I keep telling you, we are very nice people. You should not revolt. Ma'am, me. Have we understood what is epithelial tissue? Basic idea we have got. Have we understood basic idea of epithelial tissue? Yes or no? That is what I want to understand. See, if you've not understood epithelial tissue, then there is no point, right? So we've understood what is an epithelial tissue. Yes? Now, imagine, see, whatever I'm going to say, I want you to draw an analogy of a plastic paper. Best idea. You all have brown wrapping. How many of you know this brown paper wrapping you put for all of your books, right? You put this brown paper wrapping, right? So you get the brown paper wrapping for your books, yes? Now think of your squamous epithelium to be something like this brown paper wrapping, okay? What happens exactly? Your brown paper wrapping is found on the outer side, right? But think of this squamous epithelium to be like this brown paper wrapping, which could be present on the outside of an organ. So let's take the stomach, right? So if this is my stomach, you see that this particular epithelium, it could be found on the outside, right? It could be as an outer covering. I'm giving you an example, right? Or let's take the esophagus only. That's an easier example for me to draw. This is the esophagus. We see that on the outside of the esophagus, yes? So we see that on the outside, right? If this is the whole tube that is there, if this is my esophagus, pura ka pura tube that is there, outside will be covered, as well as on the inside. If I open this bottle and I see the inner covering will also have this, right? Which is why we see that the squamous epithelium that is there forms the outer lining of certain structures as well as the inner linings, right? Now, how does its structure look like? From the top, it is made up of flattened cells that are there, right? So, we see that it is made up of flattened cells of this manner. I am roughly drawing it. And we see that they tend to have a prominent nucleus which will look something like this. Yes? So, this is what we mean by the first type of epithelial tissue, which is your squamous epithelium, right? So this is what we understand as squamous epithelium. Now we know its structure, we know its function, and we know its location. Yes? Now apart from being protective tissues, we also see that some epithelial tissue will do one or two extra functions, right? So we see that epithelial tissue is not just like one bodyguard who will just be standing there and telling, no, you can't go in, or no, you go in, you are very important, right? Not bodyguard types protection. Does some extra stuff also. So in the case of squamous epithelium, we see that it is found in the inner lining of blood vessels, and we see that because it is single and it is a flat layer, it helps with diffusion, which we have already learnt in fundamental unit of life, which allows movement of substances from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration, right? And we know that this process of diffusion happens in the alveoli. Yes, we have learned that in our lower grades. We have a sac-like structure in our lungs, right? And we see that inside it has so many thin layer like this. And we see that diffusion happens, right? So that inner lining that is there is what is made up of your simple squamous epithelium. So when I say simple, does that mean it is a single layer of cells or multiple layer of cells? Very quickly. Simple means single layer of cells or multiple layer of cells. I need you all to pay attention. Yes? Have we understood what we mean by the word simple? Yes? Ma'am, is esophagus made up of a single layer of cells? No. Just the protective covering that is there. Right? The protective covering is like made up of squamous epithelium that is there. Right? Okay. Yes, Ansha, I will come. But in some cases, like in our body, right? So if you look at the skin is not made up of a single layer of epithelium, but rather it is made up of multiple layers, right? So we see that it is made up of multiple layers of cells which are stacked, right? So you can think about it like if you have building blocks. So for example, if I have building blocks, it is stacked one on top of the other. So this is what I understand as multiple layers. So when it gets stacked, we see that it forms different layers, or it will form different strata. So here we see that it will form different layers or different strata, which is why we call this as stratified epithelium, right? What do we call this as? We call this as stratified epithelium. And in our skin, we see that because our skin is subjected to wear and tear, right? We see that it has stratified squamous epithelium to protect it from different, from wear and tear basically. So to sum it up, right, if I have to write structure, if I have to write function, and if I have to write location, yes, this is how you will study tissues, okay? Starting with squamous epithelium, we know that they are thin, flattened cells which tend to have a prominent nucleus, right? Their primary function is to provide protection, and in this case in the alveoli also facilitates diffusion, right? Where do we find it? You can write inner lining of alveoli, and you can also write the inner lining of blood vessels, right? So we find it in both the places. Are we clear? Now on the other hand, if you have stratified epithelium, then we know that it is made up of many strata or many layers, and we see that this right here provides protection, and we find this in the skin. Are you all clear? Yes? Very good, Sampurna. It is made up of a single layer of squamous epithelium, right? How diffusion, ma'am? It allows diffusion to happen. It does not take part in diffusion. Yes? It allows diffusion. Let me write this. Allows for diffusion to happen. Okay? All good. No doubts. Right? See, basically this is how you need to learn. Right? It is not complicated. Don't overcomplicate it. It's very simple and easy. Yes? Okay. Moving on to the next one, where we will look at the next type of it, which is cuboidal epithelium. Now when I say the word cuboidal, what comes to your mind? Can you tell me? When I say the word cuboidal, what comes to your mind? Yes? Cube. No? Cube is coming to your mind. So if it is cube, if cube comes to your mind, what would this mean? Can any of you take a guess? Cubic shaped, okay. Then what would this mean, right? Can you tell me? Students having unnecessary conversations like Riddhi, Smriti, please don't. Pay attention in class, right? Very good. That means that they have a cube-like structure or they have a cube shaped. Yes, they are cube shaped or cuboid shaped. Yes. So here in this particular case, when we look at its structure, we see that they are made up of cube shaped cells. Now the next question is, where do we find them? Yes, so now next is the location. Where will I find my cube-shaped cuboidal epithelium? Yes. So now of course, as you see, when you look at the location, we see that we find it either in the linings of the kidney tubules. Yes. Now kidney tubules, how many of you don't know what kidney tubules are? Don't worry, they are basically structures which are present inside the kidney that have a very important role to play in the process of urine formation, which you will learn in next grade anyway, right? I mean, next grade mein you are going to learn all about kidney and kidney functioning, so you don't need to take tension. But abhi ke liye what you need to know is there is a structure in kidney called as kidney tubule. The inner lining of it, I will find my cuboidal epithelium. And along with that, we know that in the inner linings of salivary ducts, right? What are salivary ducts? Now, ducts we know that are basically tube-like structures which act like a path, no? So just like how you have a road connecting your house and my house, you think of a duct as a path or a road or a channel that connects two parts of the body together, right? So as we all know, we see that salivary duct is what connects your salivary glands and that transport your saliva from the salivary glands to the mouth, right? It's like a tunnel, exactly. And we see that the lining of it is also made up of cuboidal epithelium. So we see that along with just providing protection, it provides some mechanical support to the kidney tubules and the salivary duct. Yes? So now has it become a little easier to understand when I teach it in terms of structure, function and location? Has it become easy for all of you to understand? Yes? See, this is how much you need to know. Okay, this is how the cell looks like. This is where I'm going to find my tissue. This is what it does, right? Now, your main thing you need to keep in mind here is that you need to have the keywords in mind. Yes? Alveoli can tear easily. Yes, it can be subjected to damage, but we know that it's safeguarded within the lungs, right? So nothing to worry about alveoli getting damaged. Yes, but yes, bio is easy in this manner. This is a very straightforward chapter. It's not very complicated, but it has a lot of interesting things that you need to keep in mind, right? Ma'am, what keywords I am highlighting? Mechanical support, right? Whatever I'm highlighting, you just focus on that and I'll tell you the keywords also, right? Quiet soul, if you're talking to me, is there something you did not understand? Ansh, I will, but if you come and spam in another class, you know that's not going to help, right? Okay, now we will move on to the next and last set of epithelial tissues that are there, right? Now next up you have the third kind, which is your columnar. Now again, what does the word tell you? Columnar means what? What do you think of it when I say columnar? Think of it. See, it's one thing I tell you, this is what it is, this is what it is, this is what it is. I do everything for you. But unless and until you start paying attention to these details, there's not going to be any use, right? There's no thinking happening from your end. You will just tell me, "Arey ma'am, tissues is all about ratification. Just mug up and go and you will be good." But to be honest, you don't need to really mug up tissues if you get an idea. It's very simple. Very good. Columnar means column. Okay. I will take that. Sequence of column form, very good. So when you think of columns, you will think of the table ka those long columns that you sort of see, right? So in this particular aspect, can I say that they could be maybe pillar-like? Yes, can I say that they could be pillar-like cells? Can I say that? Yes or no? Can I say that they are pillar-like? Yes. So at this particular point, they are long pillar-like cells which are there. Now an interesting fact, we see that in these particular cells, right, we see that the nucleus is normally present at the bottom part of it, right? So now when you saw in squamous epithelium, we saw that it has a prominent nucleus. Now in cuboidal epithelium, one thing that I forgot to mention is that the nucleus is more or less present in the center, right? We see that it's normally present towards the center. And in the case of these cells, which are these columnar cells, we see that they are more or less elongated and the nucleus is present to the bottom part of it, right? And where do we find them? We find them in the inner linings of the intestine, right? And we see that this is where we prominently find them. And here, apart from providing protection, they also play an additional role. They facilitate, or let me use an easier word, they help in absorption, right? What does the small intestine do? The main function of the small intestine is to help in absorption of food, right? We've learned that in 7th standard. Now at this particular point, we see that these epithelial cells can also help in that absorption process and also in secreting certain substances, right? So this is what you need to understand. Where do we find them? Inner lining of intestine. Yes, epithelium mahi is nothing but the epithelial tissue that is there, right? And please don't ask me questions from another chapter. You can continue spamming bacha, but I will not answer now because I'm teaching your seniors, right? So please respect that. I will come and I will teach you this. Yes? ठीक है. Are we all clear? Are we clear with this particular part? Now I'll tell you a very simple trick to remember so many things. Now you'll tell me, ma'am, structure I have to remember, ma'am, function I have to remember, ma'am, I also need to remember, where I find them. Let me tell you something very easily. Structure, yes. From the name only you will get to know what its structure is. Now if you remember location, function becomes very easy. Now think about it. For squamous epithelium, we see that for squamous epithelium, we see that their main function, right? Or where do we find them? We find them in the alveoli. That means apart from protection, you just need to remember function of alveoli. Now if I tell they are found maybe in the intestine, right? Your columnar epithelium or your columnar cells that are there, we find them in the inner linings of the intestine. Technically, whatever function of the intestine that is there is actually carried out by your tissue. So you only need to remember so much. So don't overcomplicate and get too worried saying, "Arey ma'am, I have to remember structure separately. I have to remember location separately and then I have to again remember function." No. Make a connect out of all of it so that it becomes easy, right? Location and function is also very simple. Please don't use the word mug up. That is exactly what I said. Please don't mug up because it's actually very simple to remember. Yes. So now are we clear? So far, I have covered 4 types of epithelial tissue, right? Are we clear with it? Any doubts that you guys have so far, I will take it right now, right? Any doubts that you have so far? No doubts. Priyansh Bacha, you can ask me your doubt. But if you don't have any doubts, that means that I've done an amazing job teaching this, right? Yes, okay. Ma'am, we can do that chapter. Epidermis and epithelium. Epidermis. You guys give me the answer who know it. This is in plants. This is epithelium. This is in animals. But what do they do? Function is the same, that is to provide protection. It's as simple as that, right? Oh, amazing. None of you have doubts today. Oh, wow. I am feeling very happy. Ma'am, how does columnar help in secretion and absorption? Good question. See, like I said, no, you take the inner lining of the intestine probably, like the villi that tend to have these columnar cells like this, okay? So we see that they have these columnar cells. Now when I say that they help in absorption or they help in secretion, secretion is a different thing which we will tackle later, but hold that thought about secretion right now. But absorption, when I tell you, right, basically if villi is able to absorb food, that means if my glucose molecule from my intestine is able to go past my villi, it is because of this columnar epithelium. Understand that. So when I said that it helps in diffusion or it helps in absorption, it is just allowing that to happen, right? So that is something that you need to understand, okay? It's just that because it's allowing that, it's also a function of that. Yes? Okay. Now along with this, we see that in the case of columnar epithelium, sometimes we tend to have some specific, right? Or I would say that there are certain specialized types of columnar cells, okay? And we call this as ciliated columnar, okay? Now when you talk about ciliated columnar cells or columnar epithelial cells, it means that they have a certain structure called as cilia. Now what are cilia? Cilia are nothing but they are protoplasmic extensions, right? Which means that they are basically not some separate structure sitting on top of the cell. Okay, it's not some separate thing sitting. It's a part of the cell which has been, which has formed these extensions. Okay. Cilia in euglena, not in euglena bacha, but cilia in paramecium. Euglena has a flagella. Yes, flagella is a long whip-like structure. But in paramecium, if you see, they tend to have small structures, no hair-like structures which will keep moving back and forth. Exactly. So we see that they are hair-like structures which lash back and forth, right? And along with this, because of that back and forth movement that they have, we see that it allows for the removal, right? So especially we see that because of this movement, it allows for the removal of mucus and suspended particles. And at this particular point, we see that normally we find it in the inner linings of the trachea, right? So we find it in the inner lining of the windpipe. So again, remember where you find ciliated columnar so that you can connect it to the location and then you can connect it to its function. Yes? Okay. Array virus and everything towards the end. I'm teaching tissues. I was teaching cell for 1 month and none of you wanted to know about virus at that point, right? But now I want you to pay attention here. Yes? Ma'am, cuboidal epithelial present in salivary gland or duct, or both mean the same. Very good, Grisha. Very good. That brings me to my next point, right? Now, Grisha brought in a question saying, ma'am, there is something called as salivary duct and there is something called as a salivary gland, right? And the word gland is not very new to all of you. In your lower grades, you've heard the word gland. But today we'll kind of understand a little bit more in detail as to what is a gland, right? So I always tell you that glands that are there, right? So we see that glands are a group of cells. So we see that they are nothing but a group of cells, or it could be an organ, right? Which means that it's a larger structure, it could be an organ, which have the ability to secrete, or that means it has the ability to produce something, right? So I'll say produce some chemical substance. We'll make it easy. Okay, so this is what we understand as a gland. Now today we will understand what is responsible, right? I told you that there is something which is responsible for secreting this. Today we will understand what are these group of cells. So ideally what happens in that certain organs, right, especially in the inner linings of stomach, in the inner linings of salivary gland, in the salivary glands especially, we see that sometimes these epithelial cells only themselves acquire some specialization. So apart from just, being protective in nature, they have the ability to carry out various other functions, right? Which is why here what we observe is that these epithelial cells will get some additional power, kind of like a power up, where they have the ability to secrete certain substance. And when they have the ability to secrete a certain substance, we call that as a gland, right? And we see that they secrete chemical substances at the surface. So normally for a gland to be formed, what happens is that, so if this is my layer of epithelial tissue, right? So if this is my single layer of epithelial tissue, if this has to become a gland, what will happen is this will fold inwards, right? So we see that this will fold inwards like this. So this will eventually end up looking something like this in order to form a gland. So if it folds inwards, right? So imagine if this is your epithelial tissue, it folds inwards like this. That means it has become glandular epithelium, right? So now what has this become? It has got the function of becoming a gland. So we call it as glandular epithelium. Yes? Are you all clear? Are you all clear about this? Yes or no? Are you all clear? Ma'am, but why? Ma'am, do glands secrete hormones only? No. Saliva that is there is not a hormone, right? It's a chemical substance. It's a watery substance. So not only hormones. Yes? So now you understand, no, salivary glands that are there, the epithelial tissue that is forming salivary gland is different from the epithelial tissue that is in the lining of your salivary duct. Okay. Purvi Bacha, class 8. When I come to class 8, you ask me class 8 doubt. Don't come to other class and ask me this. Yes? Exocrine, endocrine, I'm anyway going to deal with it a little more detail in your higher grades. But simply put, your exocrine glands that are there have these ducts that I told you about, right? So we learned about salivary duct right now, which transports saliva from the salivary gland to the mouth, right? So we see that there is a duct which is present. While in the case of endocrine glands that are there, we see that there is no duct. If this is a gland, it will directly pour it into the bloodstream, right? So that's what happens. Are we all clear? Okay. So with this, everybody, to sum it up, right? I will sum it up. So we learned about epithelial tissue and the different types of epithelial tissue. Yes? So we learned that there was squamous epithelium, which is made up of flattened cells that are there, that has a prominent nucleus, found in the inner linings of the stomach, and found in the inner linings of the blood vessels and the alveoli. So we see that this the main function that is there is it forms a protective layer, and of course it prevents mechanical injury, and of course facilitates diffusion. Next we learned about cuboidal epithelium, which again is cuboidal in nature, that means cube-like in structure, and found in the inner linings of the salivary duct, and it is also found in the inner linings of the tubule, mainly helping here not with secretion absorption, but I'll also say mechanical support, right? It also facilitates mechanical support. Then we learned about stratified epithelium in the case of stratified squamous epithelium, which is found in the skin, which again provides protection. And then of course we see that we learned about columnar epithelium, which is found in the inner linings of your intestine, which has pillar-like cells that play a very important role in absorption. Then we also saw that there are varieties of it where we have ciliated epithelium, where there are cilia found on the free end of it which lash back and forth, that are normally found in the trachea or the windpipe. Then we have glandular epithelium. This is a very good image of glandular epithelium. Can you see the difference in color here and here? Are you all able to see this? Yes or no? Are you all able to see the color difference? Where they are folded inwards forming a gland, right? That's exactly what glandular epithelium is, which is found in the stomach, the salivary ducts, salivary glands, all help with secretion of certain substances. So are we feeling clear about epithelial tissue? I've taken almost 1 hour to teach you epithelial tissue, and we still have connective, muscular, so many pending. But I want to have an important role. I hope you all understand this. Okay, ma'am, if epithelial tissue provide protection, why is it that they have different functions? See, over a period of time, now of course if you look at it from primitive animals to higher animals, right? So this again is where your diversity chapter becomes very important, but don't worry, I will still teach you that, even though it's not there in your syllabus. Those of you who want to learn can come and learn from me, of course. But understand, when we talk about epithelial tissue, right, over a period of time, as our body diversified and there was more, in terms of advancement, you understand that apart from protection, they started taking up more functions to facilitate that process, which is why we see that over a period of time, we have different cells that have different shape, that have a different function, right? Very simple and easy, okay? Origin of species, bacha, no, not now. After I finish tissues, yes? Are we all clear? Are we all clear, students? Yes, are we all feeling clear about this particular topic, right? JT, I have given you the answer. Duct is a passage. Gland is a substance which secretes a chemical substance. Good? Okay. So if they ask you to write about the epithelial tissue, this is how you will have to write. This is just some pointers I have with all of you, right? And here we get a good idea of what is what, right? Now we will move on to the next type of it, which is muscular tissue that is there, right? So next up, we are going to move into muscular tissue. But before that, how many of you want to have a 2-minute break before I do the next set of things? Because next we have muscular, and then we have connective, and then we have nervous. Trust me, muscular and nervous is very easy, but connective can be little heavy, right? So how many of you want maybe a 2-minute water break, right? Shall I give you all a 1-minute water break so that you can quickly drink water? Because this particular class will go on for a total of 2 hours, right? So it will go on for about 2 hours, which is why I request you all to take a quick 2-minute water break, and we'll be back, okay? 5 minutes बहुत ज़्यादा होगा तो 2 minutes and I'll be back. Okay, all right. I also just went to drink some water. Are we ready? Yes? Are we feeling a little bit energized? Jaldi, jaldi, everybody has water, right? Okay. See, I'll tell you one thing, and that's my promise to you. Okay, if you sit throughout today's class, if you sit till the end of 2 hours maybe, and I know it's a lot to ask from all of you because you've just come back from school, all of you must be super exhausted. But let me tell you one thing. If you sit with me till the very end, my promise to you is that animal tissues would have become a lot more easy. You will go to school and say, "Arey, tissues chapter, nothing is there. It's such a easy chapter. Y'all are just unnecessarily hyping it." That's my promise to you, that I will make this chapter as easy as possible, because animal tissues can be intimidating, but trust me, it's very, very easy, right? It's very simple and it is very easy. Yes? Okay. 2 hours, not 2 more hours, 1 more hour, 1 more hour. I'll try to finish my best in 1 more hour, right? Okay, so we'll get started with the next one, which is muscular tissue. Yes, so the next topic that we're going to look at is, we will be looking at muscular tissue. Now, when I talk about muscular tissue, what is the first thing coming to your mind, right? When I say muscular, muscles and all of this, what do you think of? You tell me, whatever is it honestly. How many of you are thinking of, ma'am, muscles means I will think of somebody standing like this and posing and saying, "Arey, I have, worked out so much. I am strong," right? Normally we think of it that way, right? There are already people sending me muscles ka emoji as well, right? Yes. So now when we think of muscles, we will think of all the dola that is there. Yes, I am strong, right? Normally we relate it with strength. Biceps, triceps, yes, all types of muscles and everything is coming right now. But think of it very simply, that when we think of muscles, we think of strength. And apart from strength, we also know about movement. So when you talk about muscular tissue in general, we see that muscular tissue that is there is primarily a type of tissue that is responsible. So we see that this is a tissue that is responsible for movement, right? So whenever you hear the word muscular, think of it as movement, right? Now now you know the function is primarily to do movement. Now in this case, if you look at it structurally, we see that muscular tissue is made up of normally elongated cells, right? So we normally call it as muscle fibers, or we call them as muscle cells. But mainly we see that these muscle cells have a very important role, right? We see that they have some special proteins inside them. So it's not like, the muscle cells are just able to move and the other cells in our body choose not to move. The muscle cells in our body are able to move because of these proteins which are present, and we call them as contractile proteins. Yes? Contractile. So again, the word contractile comes from contraction, right? So we see that these contractile proteins that are there allow for the contraction contraction and relaxation of muscles, right? And we see that they utilize ATP for their functioning. So this is a broad overview of what muscular tissue does, right? Now, if muscular tissue is responsible for movement, how many types of movement do we have? Can you tell me? What are the types of movement? You will tell me, ma'am, there is movement that I can control, right? There is movement where I can move my hand, I can control the way I talk, right? I can choose when to talk. This is something I can control. The movement of my legs is something I can control. While there are some movements in my body which I cannot control, right? For example, my heart beating. I cannot control my heart beating. Or after I swallow my water, how my water goes through my body, I will not be able to control, right? So there are things which are in our control and there are things which are out of our control. Which is why broadly we see that movement is of two types. We have voluntary and involuntary. Yes? So we see that voluntary that is there is when it can be controlled by me or by one's will. So normally we see that this is something we understand as voluntary movement. While on the other hand, if I cannot control my movement, I will call it as involuntary. And based on this voluntary and involuntary movement, we have three types of muscular tissue. Yes? So the three types of muscular tissue that are there include your skeletal muscles. Then, let me just write this neatly. Then you have your smooth muscles. And then, of course, last but not the least, we have our cardiac muscles, right? So we see that we have these three types of muscles that are there or muscular tissue that we find. So let's get started with the first one, which is going to be the types of muscles. And this is a very, very important question that they can ask you in the exam, where they will ask you to enlist or describe the three types of muscles along with their location, right? So this is something that they will ask you. So how will we get started? Let's get started with the first one, which is skeletal muscles. Now I want you to take 1 minute of time and see this. Just see what you see right behind me. This is exactly how our muscles are arranged, right? So if you see, the cells of our body that make up our skeletal muscles look something like this. What do they remind you of? To be honest, have you seen those ads where you've seen all those wires, no? Especially you have many small wires which is encapsulated in a, an insulating sheet, right? Exactly. They all look like wires, no? They look like some pipes. Now you have a visual, right? You have an analogy in which you will remember skeletal muscles look like wires or they look like pipes of somehow, right? So now if you look at it, three things that we need to keep in mind. We have structure, we have location, and we have function, right? Now when I talk about skeletal muscles, where will I find my skeletal muscles? Can you tell me? If I refer to them as skeletal muscles, I know that I will find them in close association with my bones, right? So with my bones or my skeletal system, we see that with the bones or the skeletal system, with the bones, it is closely associated with the bones, right? Which is why, or with the skeleton, which is why we call it as skeletal muscles. Now, of course, in this particular case, we also have its structure. Now, when you look at it structurally, right, we see that these particular tissues are made up of cells which are cylindrical, right? So we see that the cells here are cylindrical. We see that they are elongated, right? And do we see any branching happening like trees? No, right? We don't observe any branching that is happening. So in this particular case, we see that they are also unbranched, right? So we also observe that these guys are unbranched here. And a very interesting thing about them is that each muscle fiber that is there or each skeletal muscle cell, we see that they don't, because of the way they are arranged and their structure, we see that they are made up of many nuclei, right? So we see that in this particular case, they are made up of many nuclei and not just one kind of it, right? Does every tissue have nucleus? Tissues are made up of cells, so they do have nucleus, right? Now, along with this, we see that their function is something that we know, right? What is the skeletal muscles mainly involved? Now, mainly they are found in your arms and your legs, right? And we see that they are mainly involved in controlling voluntary muscles or voluntary actions. Now, a very important characteristic that we should not avoid, right, is that there is a lot of branching. Yes? So in this particular case, we see that, there is no unbranching, but we see that there are alternating, right? We observe that there are alternating dark and light bands, right? So we see that this is again due to arrangement of certain proteins within them. Yes? So we see that there are alternating dark and light bands, which is why we also call them as striated muscles. Why? Because there is a stripe-like pattern present because of this alternating dark and light band. Yes? Are we all clear? Now one question, somebody asked me, ma'am, why is it that ATP, like how is ATP getting utilized? Is mitochondria there? Absolutely, they are cells. Mitochondria will be there, right? Which is why this is something we will observe. Okay? So quickly to summarize, when we talk about skeletal muscles, right? So when you look at its structure, we see that the structure of skeletal muscles are such that we see that they are made up of these long, so let me just draw it. Yes. So we see that they are cylindrical. We observe that they are elongated. And we see that they are multinucleated. And here, of course, we see that they are unbranched. Yes? They are unbranched. Now, along with this, what we also observe is that these guys here tend to have alternating dark and light bands, right? So we see that they tend to have alternating dark and light bands, which is why in this particular case what we see is that they tend to have a striped pattern or they tend to have striations. Yes, so they tend to have this. Now when you talk about its location, right, so when we talk about its location, we see that these folks here or these muscles, right, they are closely associated with the skeleton and they make up about 40 to 50% of our body. And along with this, when you talk about the function, let me use another color maybe. So when we talk about its function, we see that the main function here is to help in controlling voluntary actions. Now what do I mean by voluntary actions? Things you and I can control, like walking, it could be talking, right? All of it. Are we clear? Yes or no? Are we clear? Secret Queen, all the other students, if you're not going to pay attention in the live class, if you're coming here to waste your time, why are you doing this, right? There is so much effort that goes into all of this, right? So it's important that you all pay attention, no? Multinucleated. Why are they multinucleated? Firstly, because of the arrangement of cells that are there, the way the cells are formed, right? So that is one of the many reasons why they are multinucleated. So when many cells come up together, right? So see, again, understand that this tissue is being formed by many cells. And the way it gets arranged, we see that it ends up becoming multinucleated. Okay? Are we clear? Ma'am, by many nuclei, it means that more than one nucleus. Exactly. Ma'am, please, voluntary. Voluntary is something that you and I can control, right? So me walking, me writing on the screen, all of this is something that I can control, right? So that is what I mean by voluntary. Are they living cells? Absolutely. They are living cells in our body. Yes? Good to go? Everything is clear about skeletal muscles? Are we clear? Are we all clear? Shall we move on to the next type? Very good. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the next type of muscle cells that we find, which is your smooth muscle cells that are there, right? So when we talk about smooth muscles, okay, when I say the word smooth, what do you think of? When I say the word smooth, what comes to your mind? Think about it. You will tell me, ma'am, soft, right? Nothing, like it's like a plain surface, no soft plain surface of sorts, right? So the word smooth muscles comes from the fact that if you look at its structure, we see that there are no striations available. So these guys don't have that stripe pattern that I was telling you about, right? So we see that there are no striations or there are no stripes which are present here. Yes, and we see that in this particular case we also call them as unstriated muscles, or sometimes I can call them as involuntary muscles also, right? Now in this particular case, since we started talking about its structure, we see that no striations or no stripes being present is a very important characteristic. But if I were to take one single smooth muscle cell, right, and I draw it like this, it will appear to be something like this. See? They will look something like this. Now we see here that this particular shape is called as spindle shaped, right? So we call this as spindle shaped cells. Now we see that spindle shape is where it is broader in the center and it is tapering or it is narrow at the edges, right? And we see that these cells only have a single nucleus, so they are uninucleate, right? And again we see that there are no branches which are present, so they are unbranched. Now where will I find these smooth muscle cells, right? Eye shaped is also something you can say, but of course eyes are also of different shapes, right? So in this particular case, right? In this particular case, what we understand is that these cells that are there, yes? We see that they are mainly responsible for controlling the involuntary actions of our body. So we see that these smooth muscles are found in the esophagus, they are found in the intestines, right? So we find them in all these places. Even in the ureters, we find them in the different parts of our body for which the functions we cannot control, right? So we find them in different parts. Heart, good question Sampurna, I'll be getting to that very soon. And we see that they are mainly responsible for regulating involuntary, for controlling all the involuntary actions that are there. Then what about the heart? Isn't the heart also an involuntary action, the beating of the heart? But because if you see, unlike other organs that are there in our body or other parts of our body, the heart is very special. What is so special about the heart? The heart is the only organ that is there which rhythmically starts beating right from the minute we are alive till the minute we die, right? So it needs to work 24/7 all throughout our lifetime, which is why in this particular case, the heart is made up of a special kind of muscle called as the cardiac muscle, right? Now structurally, this cardiac muscle is somewhere between your smooth muscle and your skeletal muscle, because here we see that they are made up of cylindrical cells, right? But they are uninucleate, unlike your skeletal muscle which was multinucleate. And unlike in the other case, we see that these tissues are branched. That means that the cell is we see that these are made up of cells which are branched in this manner. And we also see that they have some specialized structures called as intercalated discs, right? And these discs are very important, that connects all these different cardiac cells together, such that the rhythmic beating of the heart that is there, that beating that the heart does, it gets information, right? It gets electrical information from the nervous system, which we will learn about anyway. But in this particular case, we see that for the information to be equally passed across, we see that this intercalated disc is very important. So the function and location is very clear, but you only need to understand how is the difference that is happening. So very quickly, this is a very easy tabular column that will help you understand the difference between your striated muscles, your unstriated muscles, and your cardiac muscles, right? So everybody take a quick screenshot. Take a quick screenshot of this. This will make it easy, and this table is also to tell you that when you are studying tissues, pura ka pura, you should be able to study from a tabular form for revision, right? Yes, see, plant related doubts, we will do another full chapter quiz. So that time I will take it. Abhi ke liye I'm going to restrict my class to talking only about animal tissues, right? So when I say discs, right? Discs are nothing but they are, what analogy can I give you? Think of it kind of like a mouse, right? How you have a mouse, right? Imagine if this mouse was on my hand. This is a disc-like structure that you see. Acid disc-like it will be there. That connects different cells together. Yes? Do you want me to do this once again? Do you want me to recall muscular tissue again? But see, if I recall muscular tissue, I need to run with connective tissue. Because connective tissue is very, very hefty. Right? So how many of you are clear with this? Control coordination, I'm coming on Wednesday. Kindly don't spam, bacha. Yes. Are we all clear? Yes. Amazing. Let me know, otherwise I will not know, right? You don't want me to do another thing. Very good. So when you're writing the answer, please make sure that all of you write the answer structurally. I'm not spending time here. Now this is a question for everybody. Give me 3 features of cardiac muscle. Yes? Give me 3 features of cardiac muscle. Aise chat pe, this is a question for all of you students. If you're watching this video later, you can pause it right now and give me the answer. Yes? Okay. Now you have to tell me the answer. We have already discussed this part, right? So they're made up of cylindrical cells, it is branched, involuntary actions ke liye, makes heartbeat, helps in contraction, they are never tired, very good, helps in pumping, very good, very good. So we know that they are branched, uninucleated, we know that they form a network, and we know that they are made up of involuntary muscles, we know that it helps in heartbeat, yes, very good, it has the intercalated discs as well, beautiful. Proud of you. I will give you 3 out of 3 marks for this, right? Because they've asked you for 3 features. 3 out of 3 marks, then and there. Now we will move on to the next kind of category of tissues, which is connective tissues, right? Now, very honestly, I want you to tell me how many of you get very intimidated, right? You get very scared looking at connective tissues just because there's a lot to study about. How many of you get scared? Be honest to yourself right now. Admit that that is the problem, that just when you have a look at the size of the topic, you tell yourself, ma'am, I am done. I will not understand connective tissue as a topic. This is not for me. Because when you look at muscular tissue, you look at epithelial tissue, aise choto topics, you will be like, okay, ho jayega. But when you look at connective tissue, it is a very vast topic in itself, right? Which is why today we will overcome that fear of connective tissue, because trust me, connective tissue has a very basic concept and you just need to build on top of that, right? So now let me give you a simple analogy. So now I'm sure that whenever you want to build a house, right? We have taken the analogy of house again when we were talking about cells. So here if you see, if I want to build a wall, right? And I want to build a wall full of bricks, what will I need, right? I will require cement, yes? So just like that, in our body, we have different tissues, we have different organs, we have different organ systems, right? So in this particular case, is there any tissue that acts as a cement or a glue that binds all these different parts together? Because now we're learning epithelial tissue, as epithelial tissue alone we looked at, right? Then we learn muscular tissue, okay, chalo, muscular tissue is also there. Then we know some organs are there in our body, some heart is there, some lungs are there. Then we see that there is a reproductive system. So we know that there is a lot of organs, right? But it's not that the organs are randomly floating around inside our body. We see in this particular case especially, we see that all our organs are where it needs to be. All our body parts are where it needs to be. So who is responsible for that? It is your connective tissue. So let's understand what are connective tissues and the types of connective tissues that are there. Yes? So let's get started with what is a connective tissue. So when I say the word connective, what comes to your mind? Can you tell me? When you think of the word connective, something that is going to connect, right? What does that mean? Can you tell me? If I were to say that there is a connective tissue, you will say, ma'am, something to join, something to connect. It builds a connection, right? Very good. Which connects something? Okay. Good enough. That is actually the answer. right? That's actually the definition of connective tissue. So a connective tissue is something that connects, that supports, that provide, or that will bind different parts of the body together, right? So I normally define connective tissue as a type of tissue that binds different structures of our body together, right? So this is what we understand as connective tissue. Now, of course, in this particular case, right, we see that connective tissue has a wide variety. For connective tissue, see, so far when you looked at epithelial, muscular, you saw that there was a basic pattern, right? There was a very simple and basic pattern to follow. But connective tissue is very diverse. It's very different from one another. We see that some are very hard like a brick, some are sticky like a glue, some of them are fluffy like a sponge, or some of them are liquid or fluid like water. Which is why you see that broadly you tend to have three types of connective tissue. Now, how will I decide that there are three types of connective tissue? Based on something called as a matrix, okay? So we're going to learn about a very fancy word but a very easy word which is called as intercellular matrix, right? So what is a matrix? Matrix is nothing but a space that we find, right? So we see that it's a space or a, again, it is a space where we find it which is made up of different substances, yes? So now in this particular case, this matrix can be, it can be jelly-like, it could be very dense, or it could be very fluid, which is why based on this we have, you know, different types of connective tissue that is there. So what did we learn? Connective tissues are those which binds or joins different parts of our body together, provides a certain framework, at times can provide some flexibility. Broadly, we tend to have loose connective tissue, we have dense connective tissue, and we have fluid connective tissue, right? So is matrix like the cytoplasm? No. Right? Yes, you can say to an extent in some cases. In loose connective tissue, it is jelly-like. But in some cases, it could be very rigid also. But I want you to think of matrix as a... I want to give you a nice analogy. Matrix, you should think of it as a thing, for example, if you have to make lemon juice, right? Lemon juice ke liye you will put lemon, you will put, lemon extract, sugar, maybe some mint. But what will you put it all into? You will put it all of that into maybe some water or some container, right? So matrix is something of that sort, right? So are we clear? Are we clear with what is matrix? Yes? Can you all tell me if you are clear? Okay. So basically, yes. Clear. Amazing. So when you're writing the answer, we know that this is what is connective tissue and these are the different types of connective tissue that we find, right? Now, of course, you were asking me about blood. Blood is a type of connective tissue. We are going to be learning about blood as well. Now, I have a very interesting time target in front of me because we need to wind this up in the next half an hour. So shall I pick up my pace a little bit because I know I've been going very slow with this whole topic, but I wanted to make sure that you understand clearly, right? So that is my whole intent. So now, of course, in this particular case, right? Yes. So now, of course, in this particular case, I will explain to you. But now, of course, first and foremost, let's talk about the loose connective tissue that is there, right? So now when we talk about loose connective tissue, so I'm just going to write it as LCT, right? So in loose connective tissue, we see that we have two kinds where we have your areolar tissue and we have your adipose tissue. Yes? So we have a question which is very commonly again asked in your examination, that is to differentiate between adipose and areolar tissue. Yes? So let's understand this a little bit more about what do we mean by areolar and what do we mean by adipose. Okay? Now the best example of areolar tissue that I give, right? Think of areolar tissue as bubble wrap. How many of you know what is bubble wrap? Yes? How many of you all know what do we mean by the word bubble wrap? Yes? We would have all seen it, no? Whenever we buy a package or whenever we get a courier or whenever we order online, in the cardboard box ke andar mein your whether it's your laptop, your tab, or your phone, or whatever it is, it comes wrapped around this bubble wrap, right? So your areolar tissue is kind of like that bubble wrap which is there. So it acts as a packaging material, right? So what was my intent of telling you it is like bubble wrap? Because it acts as a packaging material and it fills the space between our organs, right? It fills the space between all of our organs and it supports all the internal organs. Now, apart from just acting as a packaging material and providing support, it also helps in repair, right? So we see that there are these cells which are loosely, so if we have long fiber-like cells, and we see that there are some important WBCs that are also there, right? Just in case if they are under attack, they are able to get rid of unwanted substances. Yes, so we see that in that matrix, all the cells are loosely arranged. Okay, so here we see that the cells are loosely arranged, which is why it is called as an example of loose connective tissue. So just like how in your bubble wrap all of it is loosely arranged, no? Just like that, even in your areolar tissue, it is the same. Right? So are we clear about what is areolar and why it is a packaging tissue? Yes? Okay. Sana Bacha, you came late and I was explaining when I said that I'm a little short on time. I request you to please understand, right? In case if you want to watch it from the beginning, you can rewind this live and watch it right away from the beginning and I'll be able to help you out, okay? So let's get started everybody into the next bit of it, which is areolar tissue, right? So when we talk about areolar tissue, we see, adipose tissue, sorry. We learned about areolar. Next we will move on to adipose tissue. Now adipose tissue is made up of cells which are called as adipocytes, right? So these are what we call as adipocytes. Now these adipocytes that are there have the ability to store reserve fat. Yes, so we see that they have the ability to store reserve fat, and along with this we see that it also acts as a heat insulator and also acts as a shock absorber. So apart from your areolar tissue which acts as packaging all throughout our body, we see that this adipose tissue that is there is specifically found around some important organs, right? Underneath the skin, we find it in and around kidneys which require that extra packaging. Yes? So what are the two main functions of adipose tissue? One is to provide packaging and acts as a shock absorber and also acts as a heat insulator, right? So these are the 2 points you need to keep in mind. Now they can ask you 2-mark question to differentiate between adipose and areolar. Are we clear? Are we clear about what is the basic difference between areolar tissue and adipose tissue? Are we all clear with it? Good. Okay. So when you're writing the functions down, of course, I have listed it in this manner, but you know that this is not what I would prefer. If you are differentiating, draw a table and write the points down on both the sides and write about the difference between areolar tissue and adipose tissue, right? Now that was all about your loose connective tissue. Now you have dense connective tissue. Now what did I say by loose? The cells are loosely arranged and we know that the matrix that is there is also very jelly-like. But here in dense connective tissue, what do you get an idea of? Dense means that in the matrix itself, right? The matrix that is there could have some depositions. Yes? So we see that it could have some depositions in it, right? Or we'll find certain substances in it. So let's understand a little bit more about these, okay? So under this particular category, what do we find? We find your next 4. You learned adipose and areolar, easy peasy. Next up, we have bone, cartilage, tendon and ligament. Now when I teach this part, I would like to do it as bone plus cartilage and then I will do tendon and ligament separately, okay? So we will separate it out into 2 and 2 so that it becomes easy. Because normally in your exam what they will ask you, differentiate between structure of bone versus cartilage, right? Or they'll ask you to differentiate between function of tendon and ligament, okay? This is something that they will normally ask you in the examination, which is why we will do it as bone plus cartilage and tendon ligament, okay? So now let's understand about bones. Now when I say bones, words that come to your mind are strong, you will think about rigid, you will think about strength, right? These are all the things that come to your mind. But when you look at bones, right, we see that they are a form of dense connective tissue. Now we see that the bones that are there are made up of cells which are called as osteocytes, right? Remember this. So osteocytes that are there are nothing but they are the mature bone cells of the body, right? Now if you want to talk about the bone forming cells, we see that they are the osteoblasts, right? Osteoblasts are your bone forming cells. Yes, so your bone forming cells are very new cells which will mature and they will become osteocytes, okay? Now we see that these osteocytes that are there are found embedded. That means that there will be, you think of it as hard clay, right? Or you think of it as a clay that is there and you put, beads and everything inside that. So it will be very rigid, right? Not like the beads can move around if you put it in clay. So in such a particular case, we see that these cells are found embedded in a calcium phosphorus. So the matrix that is there, if this is my matrix, it will have lot of depositions of calcium and phosphorus. And we see that that is what makes things rigid. Now along with this, we also see that they have a rich supply of blood vessels, right? So we see that these guys are richly supplied with blood vessels as well. Very, very important pointer. Now when we talk about location, we know that these bones that are there, they provide the framework, right? And we also know that these bones that are there are also all the different bones of our body come together to form the skeletal system that not only provides protection to vital organs, but it also helps in movement, right? So are we all clear with structure, function and location for bones? Yes? Any doubts that you have in this particular topic? I'm going very slow so that all of you get an understanding, right? But if you're able to follow what I'm trying to explain, it should be easy. Yes? Oh, okay. That is awesome. Jitesh. Amazing. It is clear. So now we will move on to the next one, which is commonly asked, which is your cartilage, right? Ma'am, no. Okay, I'll explain it once again once I finish cartilage, right? So when you talk about cartilage, you saw that your bones that were there were made up of cells called as osteocytes, or you can say osteoblasts. Now in this particular case, we say that they are made up of cells called as chondrocytes, right? So in this particular case, we see that chondrocytes are nothing but the cells which form your cartilage. And we see that they are found within a matrix, right? So this is a matrix surrounding it. And here we see that they are made up of matrix, which is made up of sugars and which is made up of proteins, right? So it is made up of a matrix that has sugars and proteins in it. Now we see that in this particular case, the main function, right, of the cartilage that is there is that it is present between the bones, right? So normally if there are two bones here, we see that they are present between the bones so that two hard surfaces don't rub against each other, right? So two hard surfaces don't rub against each other and thereby it reduces the friction, right? So we see cartilage is present between the two. If cartilage is not there, with all the way our bones are moving, our bones would have worn out, right? They would have gotten damaged. But the cartilage is present between the two, so that's why we are able to work or use our bones for a long period of time with very minimal wear and tear. And in this particular case, apart from that, it's also found in the tip of the ears, tip of the nose, right? And it's very soft and squishy. Now, very important point is that again, this has no blood supply, okay? There is no blood vessels in the case of cartilage, right? Unlike your bones, which is richly supplied with blood vessels, yes? So this is the main point of difference between your cartilage and your bones. Now next up you have tendon and ligament. Tendon and ligament are both fibrous, okay? They are made up of long fibrous structures, right? So we see that they're made up of long fibrous structures like this and it's very easy. Tendon that is there is something that connects your muscles to your bones, right? Because you know your bones are involved in movement, but cannot be like muscle is doing one movement, your bone is doing another movement. Muscle and bone needs to coordinate and work together. So how will they coordinate and work together? With the help of your tendons, right? So your tendon will connect your muscle and bone together such that they will be able to work. And we see that it has limited, right? Limited fibrous flexibility. Like basically in terms of flexibility, it's not so much. But on the other hand, when we talk about ligaments, right? Ligaments are a little more elastic and it connects two bones together. Yes? So if in our body all the bones that are there make up the skeletal system, it is because of the ligaments that are there. So simply put, right? You have bones which needs to be connected to bone, and you have your bone which needs to be connected to muscle, right? So you see that in this particular case, bone to bone is done by ligaments, which is nothing but your BLB. BLB means ligament is what is connecting your two bones together. What connects your bone to muscle? BTM, right? BTM means tendon connects your bone to muscle, right? This has limited flexibility while this is more elastic. Are we clear? Are we clear with this particular part? Are we clear? Because I have a question for all of you, right? This is a question for all of you to understand in great detail, right? Okay. Yes. So this is a question where you need to identify the parts labeled 1, 2, 3 and 4. So first, can you tell me what is 1, what is 2, what is 3 and what is 4? This is for all of you who are sleeping in between. Ma'am, cartilage also connects bones. No. Cartilage is just present at the end of the bones, right? They don't connect the bones. They are just present at the end of the bones, right? We will play science games soon. One is tendon, ma'am. Okay, one is tendon. I will write down your answers. Everybody is telling me, ma'am, one is tendon. 2 is ligament. This is 2. Is 2 ligament here? Okay, I see majority is telling me ligaments. I'm going to write this down. What is 3? Okay, I'm getting some answers saying 2 could also be muscle, right? Okay. 10 standard students, I will take class for you later. Why take tension? I'm going to give class. I will take class for all of that. So, conversation happening 2 between ligament and muscle. Then what is 3? What is 3? I want you to give me the answer for 3. Yes? Everybody, you have given me 1 as tendon. 2, some of you are saying ligament, some of you are saying muscle. What is 3? 3 is pointing here to this black thing. 3 is cartilage. Okay? 3 is ligament. 3 is cartilage. Cartilage / ligament. Okay, we are convinced. 4 is bone. Okay, 4 is bone. If this was out of 4 marks for students, some students have scored 4 out of 4, some students have scored 2 out of 4. Some students have scored 4 out of 4 while some have only scored 2 out of 4 because as we know, you have gone wrong in identifying what is 2 and 3. So let's understand this. Now I know where you're conceptually gone wrong. 1, you are right. This right here, okay? This part which I'm highlighting in red is connecting my bone, okay? You have all given me answer as tendon, okay? This is correct. This is tendon. 1 is tendon because what is it connecting to? Look at it. What is this connecting to? 2 has to be muscle, right? If you are telling me 1 is tendon and all of you got the answer, how can you say 2 is ligament? Because ideally your 1 should connect the bone with something, right? At this point you have told me, ma'am, tendon is something that is going to connect bone with a ligament. For students who gave me answer as ligament, are you clear as to why it cannot be ligament? It is not. It has to be muscle, right? So 2 here, that is there. So oops, let me just go back. 2 here is nothing but it is muscle. Very, very important. Now you have 3. Now what is 3 connecting? Focus on. There is one bone here. You have told me, ma'am, 4 is bone. This is also a bone. So what is getting connected? What is 4 is bone? Pakka, right? 4 is bone, everybody is convinced. But you have told me that, ma'am, 2 bones are getting connected. So what should it be? 3 that is there is a ligament, right? It is a ligament. Now understand the difference, okay? These are 2 bones, yes? These are 2 bones. Now your cartilage that is there will be present here. It's a thin layer that you see. Okay. It will be like this. On the surface of the bone you will find it. Your ligament that is there is something that will tie these bones together, right? So if these bones have to become a joint, the point where 2 bones meet is what we call as joint. But if something has to bind the 2 bones together, then this will be ligament, right? So this is your ligament and this point here is your cartilage, right? So at this point where the bones are meeting and rubbing against each other's surface, this here is sorted by your cartilage. But if 2 bones are meeting and their working has to happen together, that is your ligament. Are you clear? Are you clear? Yes? Ma'am is here only. Ma'am has not gone anywhere, but I hope we are all clear with this. All right. I think there was a slight lag, but I hope we are clear right now. Amazing. Okay. So let's get started. So this is the answer for the first part of it, right? So this is the answer. The second part is asking us to identify the difference between a tendon and a ligament, right? So they're asking us to differentiate between tendon and ligament. So then you just need to write the difference between the two. What does a tendon do? It joins your muscle to bones. What does your ligament do? Joins 2 bones together. Easy peasy. Very good. So write it in this manner. You will get 2 marks easily, right? Now let's move on to the next aspect of it where it's a very interesting question, right? Question number 8. What will happen if I dip my bone in hydrochloric acid? So if I take a bone, right, a human bone or maybe an animal bone, and I dip it in hydrochloric acid, what is going to happen? Can any of you tell me? Yes? What is going to happen? So now we know here some chemistry is going to be involved, right? So this is a little bit of application. It will burn. Okay, very good. Very good, mind of facts. Very good. See, what does your bones have in them? Your bone that is there is made up of calcium, it is made up of phosphorus, right? So your calcium that is there is going to react. The calcium component that is there is going to react, giving rise to certain compounds, right? And of course, we see that because all the calcium has been gone, it will not burn or it will not melt, right? We see that it will not, it will not kind of melt, but rather what will happen is that all the inorganic compounds that are there, the calcium and all the other substances, they will be gone and you will be left only with the organic matter. But similarly, if the bone is left to dry, right, or if the bone is left outside with no supply of blood and it is left to dry, we see that all the organic matter like the collagen and various other components, it will get destroyed and only the mineral matter is left, right? So in this particular case, we see that, as we all know, right, we see that this particular case, we see that these are the 2 instances. Yes? Okay, Satish, Bacha, why are you spamming? If it is helping someone else, let it help, right? Okay. So now are we clear? Any doubts that you have so far, right? Any doubts? This is anatomy to an extent, right? Yes. I was explaining, right? Now see, I have only 10 minutes left with me and I still have some bit of topics left to cover. I have only 10 more minutes. Which is why I'm trying not to look at the chat too much. But my question to all of you is, are we all clear? Any more doubts that you have, right? Yes, they are, Grisha, they are. They are. Hello, Shalini, welcome. All clear? Yes. Okay, Manisha. Any doubts that you have, you let me know. Hi, Dhanushka. Okay. So shall we move on to the last two topics, right? I'll take you back to muscles if we get time. Otherwise, see, I'm anyway going to do this part once more again in greater detail. Maybe I'll do a short recorded video for all of you so that maybe in under 15 minutes you're able to recall all these topics. But for now, I'm just going in a little more slow pace so that you understand. So now we'll move on to the last two questions. I have only two more questions left and our aim is to finish in 10 minutes. So I may not look at the chat, but I'm going to quickly explain the last topic left in connective tissue, and then we have nervous tissue, right? So now the last part of it is for us to understand fluid connective tissue, right? So as we all know, right, we're going to be talking about fluid connective tissue. Now in fluid connective tissue, what we observe is that in fluid connective tissue, the matrix that is there is fluid in nature. So when I say that the matrix is fluid in nature, that means that this matrix right here has some amount of water content in it. Not because of the fact that it has water, some amount of water content. Now in this particular case, we see that one common example of fluid connective tissue is blood, and then we also have lymph, which is an example of a fluid connective tissue. But today we will focus on blood. Now when we talk about blood, we know that blood is a fluid that flows all throughout our body, right? And we see that the blood that is there has a fluid matrix, which is the plasma. Right? So we see that there's a fluid matrix called as the plasma, and inside this plasma, or we find suspended in the plasma, we will find red blood cells, white blood cells, and we will find platelets. Now what is the function? We see that the main function here is to transport digested food, transport oxygen, transport hormones. So primarily we see that in this particular case, they connect different parts of the body together and they help with transport of substances, right? So what do we understand? Blood is a fluid connective tissue that has a fluid part and it has some cells which we call as the cellular part. And in this particular case, we see that the fluid part here includes the plasma, right, which has some amount of water content in it. Then the cellular part here includes red blood cells, white blood cells, and it includes platelets. Now your red blood cells are primarily responsible for transporting oxygen, white blood cells help in defense, and your platelets here help with clotting. So this was all about the functions of the blood. Now we will move on to the last topic for today, which is to understand and learn more about the nervous tissue. Now when we talk about nervous tissue, we should have an understanding of why we need to talk about the nervous tissue. See, understand that there are so many things, right? See, right now when you don't understand something, you are able to tell me, like how Pushpa is telling me, Mom, I don't understand, I have a doubt. You are able to process this information. Or rather, if she has to type that, she knows that she has to go, she touches the keyboard, she knows how the keyboard feels like, right? So we are able to sense things in our surrounding. So now if I'm walking and suddenly a ball comes my way, what will I do? I will dodge it or I will move. I'm able to respond and I'm able to coordinate with my surroundings. So you understand that we human beings, right? We see that we human beings are able to coordinate with our surroundings. And we are able to coordinate various activities happening internally as well, right? So we see that there's so much coordination that is necessary. So how do we coordinate? You imagine, right? You imagine that you are in a dance team and you need to make all the dancers dance together. Which means that you will have to communicate, you have to, dance in the sense, firstly, you should know the steps, right? Then along with that, you should also be able to coordinate with the person next to you. Now, along with that, it also involves a lot of communication with each other, right? So, in a very similar manner, we see that there's a lot of communication that happens internally. And this is because of the nervous tissue that is there. So we see that the nervous tissue is made of a specific kind of cell called as a neuron. And various neurons come together to form the nervous tissue, right? And we see that all the nervous tissue come together to form the nervous system. Now your nervous system that is there mainly includes the brain, it includes the spinal cord, right? And we know that it includes a lot of nerves, but we don't need to worry about any of these because we have a whole chapter dedicated to this in your next grade, which we will study in greater detail. So now the question here, and a very commonly asked question in your exam would be, what is a neuron? And draw a label diagram. Now structure of neuron and learning of neuron, you have a basic idea from your lower grades itself. So when we talk about neurons, right, we see that neurons are these long elongated cells that are there. Actually in the human body, it's one of the longest cells that are there as well. Now when you talk about the neuron, we see that the neuron has a prominent cell body, right? So we see that neurons have a prominent cell body, okay? This is mainly, you can say, the main part of the cell. Now from here we see that there are some branches which come out, right? We see that there are some branches which come out which we call as dendrites. So what are dendrites? They are basically cytoplasmic extensions, right? So we see that these are cytoplasmic extensions from the cell body. Now along with that there is one long projection that is there which we call as the axon, and this axon that is there ends in axon terminals. Now a very important thing to remember in the case of neurons is that these neurons that are there, right? So if this right here is a neuron, let me quickly draw a neuron. I'm drawing chotu fast diagrams, okay? So if this right here is a single neuron, all the neurons are arranged one after the other. That means that the neurons are arranged in this kind of a fashion. Okay? So we see that the neurons are arranged in this kind of a fashion, one after the other, where the terminal endings, right, which means that the axon ending of neuron 1 and the dendrite ending, right, or what I call as the dendritic ending. Yes. So this dendritic ending of neuron 2 is arranged in this manner, right? And we see that the impulse or the information that is there is received by the dendrites. It goes to cell body, goes to axon, reaches the terminal. From here, the dendrites will receive it again, right? So in this particular case, we see that the point at which we find, or rather don't pay attention to neurotransmitters and everything that we will deal later, but the intent is that there is a fine gap that exists between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendritic end of the other neuron, which we call as a synapse, and we see that information flows through in this manner, right? From dendrite it will start, it will go to axon, then reach dendrite of the next cell. So when you're writing the answer, you can elaborate it in this manner. So with this everybody, if you see, we come to the end of today's class where we have elaborately discussed it in great detail. So very quickly, right, are we all clear? I think the chat is frozen on my screen. Just give me one moment. Okay, just give me one moment. All right, okay. Yes. So with this everyone, are we all clear? Epidermis that is there is found in plants, right? So we see that epidermis is a protective layer found in plants which mainly provides protection. Are neurons and nerve cells the same? Yes. Neurons and nervous tissue is different, okay? Yes, ma'am, Schwann cell in neuron, they are cells which are found associated, right? So if you see, they are cells which are, let me just go back. So if you look at the Schwann cells that are here, we see that there is a protective covering called myelin sheath. And we see that here, inside the sheath, you will find the Schwann cells, right? Okay. Yes, I'll be done. All right, everyone. So here's I hope, right? I know today's class was very long. 2 hours worth of class happened, right? I hope all of you are now clear with this particular topic of animal tissue. How many of you believe that I stuck by my promise that connective tissue, across animal tissues has become easy? Did I make it easy for you? Did I make it easy peasy such that array tissues? I know I need to put some effort and study, but now the topic has become easy for me. I don't think it's very complicated, right? That's all I want, right? Somebody like, ma'am, it is already easy. You didn't do anything. Array. It's okay, right? So everybody, with this, of course, I will be signing off, but I have a quick homework question for all of you where I want you to tell me the difference between bone and cartilage, right? So I want you to tell me the difference between bone and cartilage and let me know in the comments of this video, right? And as you all know, I know today I did not tell much of it, but I hope that all of you know that BYJU'S here has got you covered. So do not forget to hit the like button on this video, and of course do not forget to subscribe to the channel. And trust me, we have more and more such interesting videos coming your way, right? So let me know what more maybe, in-depth concept explanations that you need, maybe some doubts that you are having. You let me know in the comments of this video and I'll help you out. I will see you all soon, everybody, but up until then, take care, lots of love, and bye bye.